Welcome back to Make Do. I'm David.
And I'm James. We're back with another build.
That's what this mess is right here. Hopefully, it's going to become Doctor Strange's spellbox from Spider-Man No Way Home.
When we saw No Way Home in theaters, we immediately knew we had to make the cube that Doctor Strange uses to contain his world-ending spell.
Luckily, we found someone had somehow already made a really nice 3D model that was ready for print.
The design really captured all the detail from the movie, from what we could remember at least, and seemed relatively straightforward to assemble.
So, we printed all the parts out using Polymaker's PolyTerra PLA. This matte PLA has quickly become our favorite printing material. It prints super nice and it sands even better. Sponsor us. Altogether, we ended up printing about 76 parts. And I think that's the most we've done for a single project. This does look like a lot, but in the end, there's only 5 or 6 unique parts that are going to end up making the cube. These pieces, printed in resin to retain the detail, will end up capping each of the 8 corners of the cube. The core was printed in 2 halves. The outer cage is made up of 8 corner pieces, each split into 2 smaller parts to eliminate the need for support material, and hopefully sanding. In addition, we have these skinny bits that will become part of the outer cage as well. These little crescent parts will help cover up the seams later on down the line. Lastly, we have these supports that will suspend the inner cube within the cage. To get things started, we're going to glue the 2 halves together to make the inner cube. In the past, we would have used CA glue, super glue, but we have been trying to incorporate more 2-part epoxy. This will give a stronger bond and create something that can be handled without falling apart, which is kind of important for hand props. This syringe style makes it really easy to get equal parts mixed together. I also go ahead and glue the corner pieces together now. I do use a little CA glue and activator to hold the pieces together while the epoxy cures, along with a little bit of tape. I don't have to worry too much about squeeze out. These end caps will eventually cover everything up. These weird shapes can be difficult to hold in place while it cures. The tape and the glue helps to hold things secure. Once these have cured, I can start to glue up the outer edges of the cage. Again, I use the CA glue clamping technique to help hold these awkward shapes together. I can then glue up half of the outer cage, using the registration pegs to keep things aligned. I keep the 2 halves separate for now to ensure I can fit the inners inside later. We aren't sanding today. In our quest to find sanding alternatives, we stumbled across a fantastic video by Props and Stuff, where he uses some UV resin and baby powder to smooth out his prop. We thought this would be a good test piece. It will end up being inside the main cage, so if we mess up, you won't really see it. The process seems pretty simple. I just add a little bit of baby powder to the resin until it gets all gloopy. Once it's reached maximum gloopness, I use this really cheap brush to apply it to the surface. The resin will eventually self-level, then I can cure it with a UV light. I continue to coat the surface with multiple thin coats. I probably shouldn't have used this cheap brush. It works pretty well. I think my technique could use some refinement, but for this, I think it's going to work out. After the resin is cured, I wipe everything down to remove any residue, and we can get to priming. I'll be using an auto primer filler to help eliminate some more layer lines. Okay, ready for primer. Holy f***, we weren't lying, we actually made the spray booth. Once the primer is dry, I give the inner parts a quick pass with some sandpaper to make sure everything is clean. I make sure all the parts are fitting together now so I don't run into any issues later in assembly. These corner pieces ended up getting 2 coats of this metallic green from Montana Gold. Here I'm using a hammered metal paint on the outer cage pieces to get a more rustic, ancient look. This also helps to hide layer lines. The effect is really nice, definitely going to be using this in the future. The inner core parts get a base coat of gold. The Rattle-Can gold is really nice, but we wanted to go with something a little bit more dynamic. For this realistic gold finish, I start by dry brushing some black onto all the gold parts. Once the black paint is dried, I can go back with this gilding wax, another tip we picked up from watching some videos from props and stuff. I apply the gilding wax on sporadically with a fan brush. Wow, I'm actually shocked at how nice this looks. I've always wanted to get a really nice aged metal finish, and I think this does a really good job in adding layers, but still catching the light and looking shiny. I apply the same treatment to the outer cage details. After checking the reference, I did notice the inner parts of the outer cage are also gold. I just go in with a little more gilding wax and paint these areas. Now I can start final assembly, starting with the inner cube. Again, I'm using 2-part epoxy here, using the CA glue to clamp everything in place while the epoxy cures. Once the supports are cured and in place, I can carefully place the inner cube. Now I can move on to the other supports in the top half of the cage. I don't have a lot of time, so I am moving quickly here. Honestly, there's probably a better way to do this part, but it worked. So I throw some heavy stuff on top and let it cure. Okay, this thing is sturdy. I am really happy with epoxy and it's not creaking. Next up, we have these skinny bits. Each face of the cube gets 2 of the shorter ones and 1 of the longer ones. For these parts, I'm just going to be using a little CA glue. They aren't structural, so I just need something that cures quickly. I do, however, make sure to scratch the surface to ensure a good bond. those in place, I can glue in these little semicircle caps. Again, just using a little CA glue. Placement's pretty easy because each groove lines up with the outer cage. Finally, I can attach the corner pieces. I'm not skimping on epoxy for these because most likely this is going to be the main point of contact when somebody handles this. Okay, it's done, but it's far too clean. Time to do some weathering. For this, I'm going to be using multiple washes of green and brown. Nothing fancy, just some acrylic paints. Not only will weathering help pull out some of the details, it will give the whole piece a sense of cohesion. A lot of times if a project you're working on isn't quite looking right, or maybe it just feels too plasticky, a weathering pass can help push the project to the next level. In addition to a brush, I'm also using one of these sponges to add some nice grimy texture. Once all the weathering paint is dry, I go over these nice runic details with some rub and buff to pull out the high spots. And for the finishing touch, I go back with some gilding wax to brighten up some of these gold areas. I think that's it. It's really hard to tell when you're done weathering, but I like where this is.
Wow, this thing looks amazing.
Yeah, it's probably my new favorite project, which again, I think I say with every project.
All the different layers and different finishes really make it look real.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to mess around with some new paints, and I think I'm quickly building up a collection of gold finishing techniques.
I also enjoyed how little sanding needed to be done on this one.
Yeah, the resin trick was a nice touch. Along with the filler primer, the hammered metal spray paint, and the resin prints for the corners, we really didn't have to do much sanding.
And the size of the piece and the weathered finish really help hide a lot of the layer lines just by drawing your eyes elsewhere.
Yeah, and like this thing, it just looks just like it does in the movie.
Believe it or not, it was 100% CGI in the movie, so this might be one of the few physical versions of it.
Ah, so ours is actually more real than the movie. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay up to date on all of our upcoming videos.
And if you want to see some behind the scenes, sneak peeks, and smaller projects, make sure to check out our socials.
With all the new Marvel stuff coming out over the next month, if you have an idea for our next Marvel project, let us know in the comments below.
Thanks for watching.
See you in the next one.